This was a question, Arvind Subramanian. So when you look across, I work for the Peterson Institute and for Nancy at the Center for Global Development. So when you look across countries, there is no correlation between political systems and economic growth. But my question, over the last 1 or 2 years, I've been kind of revising that a little bit in India, because it seems to me that the way democracy has taxed India, at least in the last 10 years, is through fiscal populism. And what seems to be happening in the last 8 months after you came back was the notion gaining that maybe fiscal prudence is also good politics. Do you think that is now spreading in the Indian political system, or is it something that's going to be associated with Mr. Chidambaram only?
Well, I can't speak for the Indian political system, but I can speak for the Congress party. I think the Congress party accepts the position that I have taken. In fact, the correct way to put it is, I have taken the position which reflects the Congress parties. The position is that growth is an imperative. Growth is the first requirement. I said so in my budget speech. I said without growth, we talk about growth leading to inclusive development. Without growth, there will be neither inclusiveness nor development. That's what I said in my speech. Now, that is the policy that is accepted by the Congress party. So as long as the Congress party is at the helm of affairs, I believe that they will accept that growth is necessary, but growth is not sufficient. Growth is necessary in order to lead to inclusive development. Now, once you accept that paradigm, you have to observe fiscal discipline. You have to raise adequate revenues. You have to contain expenditure. You have to balance your books to a large extent. Of course, a developing country can have a small fiscal deficit. You have to contain inflation. All that, I think, follows in the natural course once you accept the premise that growth is necessary, growth is an imperative, and it is only growth that will lead to inclusive development.
Speaking of development.
Yeah. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Arvind, too. I'm Nancy Birdsall, the Center for Global Development. I think, Mr. Minister, you've been wonderfully clear and straightforward, including on this issue of growth and fiscal prudence are, in your mind, in part, a matter of delivering development for, say, the bottom half of your population in terms of income. And it's clear that, you have other ministers and other parts of government that are concerned fundamentally with social policy. But because you raised the issue of implementation, and then you went to examples that you can manage at the central level, I just thought to ask you, because implementation is such a constraint, a problem, not expenditures, but implementation on delivery of social services, protection of the poor, social insurance, and so on. Could you say something about the vision in the party and in the coalition government about how, at the federal level, the state and local governments can be perhaps given incentives to deal better with their implementation problems?
Actually, more and more states are coming around to the view that implementation is the key. Until about 10 years ago, most governments were not re-elected. If you were in office for 5 years, you were more or less certain to be defeated in the next election. That seems to have changed in India over the last 10 years. Incumbent governments are getting re-elected. The government in the center got re-elected in 2009 with a larger number. We went to election with 145 seats. We came back with 206 seats, 61 seats more. Since then, governments have been re-elected in Gujarat, in Madhya Pradesh, in Tripura, in Nagaland, in Assam, in Mizoram, Meghalaya, Odisha. So I think this has whetted the appetite of political leaders and political parties that perhaps defeat is not inevitable. Perhaps you can get re-elected for the second time and a third time. And then if you look at it closely, governments which are seen to have delivered are the governments that are re-elected. It's a perception that this is a government which has delivered or made a sincere attempt to deliver on 10 items and has delivered on 5 or 6, they seem to get re-elected. So I think this fever of implementation seems to have caught on with more and more state governments. And that is, I think, a very welcome sign. So I think once you bring the state government on board and say, listen, let's get together to implement this project, I think it's happening. For example, the metros. Following the example of Delhi Metro, today there's fierce competition for a metro in every state capital. We have a metro being built in Mumbai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai, and Kochi, and a couple of other capitals. So there's competition to get a metro done because people who travel to Delhi and travel in the Delhi Metro say this is world class and why are we not having it in our state capital? Likewise, the 4-lane highways which are tolled. Now, once people start traveling in some of those highways, they are asking the question, why is my city not connected with the other city by the similar highway? There's a competition now for these 4-lane tolled highways, and people are willing to pay tolls when even 10 years ago, I would have been scoffed at if I said people will be willing to pay tolls. So I think implementation fever is catching on. What we need to do is find ways and means to get rid of bureaucratic and other obstacles, policy obstacles and bureaucratic obstacles to implementation.
That's a great note on which to end. Now, I'm afraid we're at the end of our time. Thank you all. I noticed not a single person stirred. You were fascinating as always, and we'll look forward to welcoming you back. Whatever happens in the next election, we will look forward to welcoming you back for a report on implementation, energy, the new India, and perhaps the U.S.-India Free Trade Agreement that our group is going to design for you. So thank you very much.